Washington Journal continues.
James Taylor is joining us now. He's the president of the Heartland Institute, a free market think tank, to talk about the Biden administration's proposals on climate change. Mr. Taylor, when you heard what the president had to say this week, what was your reaction?
Well, I was very concerned because American workers really need jobs right now, especially as a result of the government shutdowns and lockdowns. And what the Biden climate plan does is it destroys jobs throughout the country. The shutdown of new leases for oil and gas production on federal lands, that puts literally hundreds of thousands of jobs on the table to be chopped. The Keystone pipeline, blocking that also kills jobs. And so what we're seeing here is really, we're seeing a jobs destruction pandemic being unleashed on the American people, and it's entirely unnecessary.
How do you view climate change? Do you believe it's real?
Well, we know through science that the Earth's climate has always been changing, and we also know that during the past century, as we emerged from the Little Ice Age, temperatures have warmed. It's also quite possible that humans are playing a measurable role in that warming. But of course, the fact that the Earth may be warming, and even if humans are causing a significant portion of it, doesn't mean we're facing a crisis, especially when we realize that temperatures throughout the most of human civilization have been warmer than they are today. And that comes from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's important to look at the question, is warming really necessarily bad? Is it harmful? Is it crisis? And sometimes the issue of whether the Earth is warming gets conflated with whether that's necessarily bad or a crisis.
The president, in his outline at the White House of his proposals to address climate change, used the word jobs somewhere in the range of 15 times, according to news reports. Here he is talking about how he believes what he wants to do would create jobs.
We know what to do. We've just got to do it. When we think of climate change, we think of it, this is a case where conscience and convenience cross paths, where dealing with this existential threat to the planet and increasing our economic growth and prosperity are one and the same. When I think of climate change, I think of, and the answers to it, I think of jobs. A key plank of our Build Back Better recovery plan is building a modern, resilient climate infrastructure and clean energy future that will create millions of good-paying union jobs, not $7, $8, $10, $12 an hour, but prevailing wage and benefits. You know, we can put millions of Americans to work modernizing our water systems, transportation, our energy infrastructure to withstand the impacts of extreme climate. We've already reached a point where we're going to have to live with what it is now. That's going to require a lot of work all by itself without it getting any worse. When we think of renewable energy, we see American manufacturing, American workers racing to lead the global market. We see farmers making American agriculture first in the world to achieve net zero emissions and gaining new sources of income in the process. And I want to parenthetically thank the Secretary of Agriculture for helping me put together that program during the campaign. We see small business and master electricians designing, installing, and innovating energy-conserving technologies in building homes and buildings. And we're going to reduce electric consumption and save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in energy costs in the process.
James Taylor, your response to the president.
Well, Joe Biden talks about creating millions of jobs. We could create millions of jobs paying people to dig holes and then fill them back up again. It doesn't make America better. It makes our standard of living decreasing when we're employing people to do something that accomplishes very little. The greatest existential threat that we're facing right now is Joe Biden's climate plan to American jobs. You do not create net jobs by forcing people to leave efficient energy sources and instead utilize inefficient energy sources. You do not create net jobs by forcing the American economy to give up inexpensive and affordable energy and instead to run on more expensive energy. So yes, you can be creating jobs in the wind and solar power industry if you mandate that people have to utilize wind and solar power. But when you're imposing greater costs on the American economy, we are going to lose a far greater number of jobs both in the conventional energy industry and also throughout the entire economy as people have less money to spend on goods and services that right now they spend that money to bring back home goods and services that improve their lives and make our lives happier, healthier, wealthier, longer lasting. So this is really going to be a net jobs killer.
We want our viewers to join in on the conversation as well. Democrats, your line is 202-748-8000. Republicans, 202-748-8001. And Independents, 202-748-8002. Text us with your thoughts and include your first name, city, and state at 202-748-8003. Mr. Taylor, the Interior Department says that existing leases won't be impacted, that onshore and offshore, the oil and gas industry is sitting on approximately 7,700 unused approved permits to drill.
Yeah, well, when people talk about the unused permits, that's a head fake. That's not a legitimately presented argument, because the oil producers, they purchase leases and then they have to go explore and find out if it's worth producing. They're not allowed to go and do all these tests before they decide to purchase a lease. So there's an amount of risk involved, and that only a certain percentage of them are going to be worth exploring. And if you're going to say you have to go and drill wells in leases and lease areas that really aren't productive before we'll let you drill to the productive ones, again, that's getting everything's completely backwards. Also, when they say that, well, we're not impacting current leases, it's just future leases, there was a steep production decline in oil rigs during the first 6 to 12 months. That's when you get the vast majority of your oil production. So if we're going to put, even if it's a 6-month freeze on that, what we're saying is that the time period during which we produce most of our energy, we're going to freeze that and eliminate that. Now, that's quite frightening, considering that, for example, 25% of U.S. oil production occurs on federal lands. So we are putting a very significant stifling impact on oil production for 25% of what we produce. We fought decades to get to the point where we became the world's energy dominant nation. We fought decades to get to the point where we weren't reliant heavily on Middle Eastern and other global oil imports, and that's going to change overnight. And that's just throwing it away for no reason.
Let's go to Dave in Annapolis, Democratic caller.
Good morning.
Morning.
It seems that your guest, obviously, which is typical for this particular viewpoint, that they'll gloss over a couple of different points. Number one, the jobs are not the only metric. Jobs aren't going to matter if we're on a planet that is choked with pollution. So, number two, it's as if we're all in a car. Yeah, there are temperature fluctuations in and outside, but if you've got one person in a car smoking, fine. If you've got 10, you've got a problem. We've got everybody smoking right now, and we're all suffering for it. And the other thing is, it's not do you believe in climate change, do you believe the scientists? This data didn't come out of nowhere. So it isn't also, by the way, digging holes and filling them up. We moved from firewood to oil, from oil to nuclear. We realized nuclear wasn't good, and now we're back in oil. But there are legitimate jobs created by solar, wind, and moving away from this. And hanging on to old oil jobs like coal is not the answer. So address those few points, if you would, please, and be specific.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate your call and your concern. I'll note that regarding the desire to reduce pollution, I think that's everything all Americans share, and I share that too. The United States has reduced carbon dioxide emissions more than any other nation this century. And the reason we've done that is because we've allowed the market to work and for natural gas to replace coal, not according to government dictate, not according to the United Nations programs, but simply allowing American ingenuity and workers to work. Now, the Biden freeze on new oil and gas production on natural lands would put a significant dent in that natural gas production that has allowed us to lead the world in emissions reductions. So I am very concerned about Biden's proposal in terms of emissions themselves. As far as the science regarding climate change, I think it's important to note, for example, that according to the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's latest report, they find low confidence that there's been any impact of climate change on hurricanes. They find low confidence of any impact of climate change on tornadoes, low confidence of any impact on floods, low confidence of any impact on droughts. What we have are predictions fueled by computer models that for 30 years have failed. But I do believe in the science, and I do believe in scientists. So if you were to go to the Non-Governmental International Panel on Climate Change, NIPCC website, you will see thousands of pages of scientific literature, peer-reviewed, cited, and fact-checked, that present this science. If you go to the Heartland Institute's website, heartland.org, you can find video of past climate conferences where we have had hundreds hundreds of scientists who have discussed the climate change issue. So I think the science is on our side. I think the economics are on our side. And if you do believe in a climate crisis, the best thing that we can do is allow natural gas production to continue as it has during the past 5 to 10 years.
Peter, Valley Cottage, New York, Republican.
Yeah, Mr. Taylor, you're absolutely right. The Democrats always talk about the science. Well, let's look at the science. The last ice age lasted over 100,000 years. About 12,000 years ago, the planet started to warm up. We had nothing to do with that, okay? When I was young, we were always talking about when the next ice age was going to start, okay? The Earth is a dynamic place. It's constantly changing. The tilt of the Earth changes every 20,000 years. It's called precession. When that happens, the Earth changes. The Earth's orbit changes. Right now, we're in a circular orbit. Sometimes we're in an elliptical orbit. When we're in an elliptical orbit, because of the way the other planets pull on the Earth, it gets colder, okay? When you have a warming of the planet, CO2 goes up because it gets greener. Plants put out oxygen. Oxygen is not a greenhouse gas. It actually cools the planet. When the amount of oxygen builds up to a certain level, the planet cools down, and then you get an ice age. So, and continental drift. The circulation of the ocean has a factor on the planet's temperature. Okay, all these things are all factors, and the United States has lowered its carbon footprint for the last 20 plus years. But the problem is that if we inhibit our ability to produce things here in this country, Americans are not going to stop buying their junk. It's going to go to China. If you make it more difficult to produce goods and services over here in the United States, that money's going to go to China, and they're going to continue to pollute because China and India are the two biggest polluters in the world.
Okay, Peter. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for pointing those facts out, Peter. You make some very good points about how we have to consider the context of the Earth's climate history, and not just ancient climate history, but recent climate history. So, for example, the Little Ice Age, which lasted from approximately 1300 to 1900 AD, that was the coldest period of the past 10,000 years. So whenever we hear folks say that 9 of the 10 hottest years occurred this decade or whatever, that's because they're only comparing temperatures, what they call the record, the 9 of the 10 hottest years on record. They're referring to the past 100 years, which is convenient for them. But the fact of the matter is, it's a very good thing that we are not still at the coldest we've been in 10,000 years. For most of human civilization, temperatures have been warmer than they are today. That's been documented by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And during that time period, without 21st century technologies, human civilization developed and thrived and flourished. So when we're looking at the notion that somehow we're in some unprecedented time period, that is a delusion. In reality, temperatures are abnormally cool, not abnormally warm. In fact, if you look at over the past the few ice age glaciations that have occurred, if we go back over the past, say, 700,000–800,000 years, we have had 3 or 4 warming periods between the ice ages. Each one of those were warmer than our present warm period. Now, we hear in the news oftentimes how carbon dioxide emissions are higher than they've been in a million years. Well, if carbon dioxide emissions are higher than they've been in a million years, and yet temperatures have many times been warmer than today, it tells us that carbon dioxide, while it may cause some warming, is not the driving factor for the Earth's climate. But again, good observations, and thank you very much, Peter.
Michael, Lake Villa, Illinois, independent.
Yeah, I like to speak about the climate, not the climate, but I worked in the coal and oil and construction industry. Worked in Wyoming in the oil and gas fields. I remember back in around 2000 when Cheney was vice president, they had the energy bill. But he started this opening up more and more federal lands. Wyoming and a lot of these western states are almost all owned by the federal government. And they're land leasing all this stuff. I was working in the BP oil fields and gas fields. They were predicting then gas it's going to quadruple in price. What happened was we became the largest natural gas producer in the world. In the Wamsutter, it was in Wamsutter, Wyoming. Large gas field is Pinedale, Wyoming. Wyoming's full of oil and gas and the wind turbines. You could make enough wind in Wyoming to probably produce electricity in the whole country. is empty, barren land federal government owns. The problem is you don't have the grid capacity to move all this stuff. We have a shortage of electric grid, the capacity. We don't have a shortage of energy.
Okay.
We never did.
Mr. Taylor?
Well, the caller brings up a couple good points, and that is that wind power and solar power, especially wind power, are very land intensive. So if in Wyoming or Montana or northern Colorado, if we were to decide to power much of our grid through wind power, for example, we would have to place 300 square miles of wind turbines just to replace a single conventional power plant. Now, if we want to do more than replace a single conventional power plant, again, multiply that 300 square miles over and over and over again. And as the viewer points out, you also have to build transmission lines, despoiling more land to deliver that power to metropolitan population centers. If you're a conservationist, if you care about preserving open spaces, then you should be very concerned about wind and solar power, and especially wind power, because these are the types of energy sources that are tremendously disruptive to an unspoiled American landscape. And I love open spaces. I love when I travel, getting out into nature. I want to see nature preserved, and I don't want to see it despoiled unnecessarily by imposing inefficient energy sources on the American people.
Roy's a Republican in Las Vegas. Your turn, Roy.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for C-SPAN. My biggest concern is every time the Democrats talk about investing in jobs, it's always the government is paying for those jobs, whereas free enterprise jobs that are lost, that there's a big difference there. And I think we should be good stewards of the land. I think former President Trump had a pretty good stance on where he look at everything, all of the sources, but don't just completely wipe out the jobs that are there. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. And it's important to understand that even under today's system, the system is gamed in favor of wind and solar power. There are tremendous tax subsidies for wind and solar power that absolutely dwarf any asserted tax subsidies for conventional energy production. And on top of that, you have utilities that stand to make profits when they build out new wind and solar systems. And yet, nevertheless, even with those advantages, still less than 10% of our electricity comes from these sources. Why is that the case? The case is because it's so tremendously expensive. And if the only way that we're going to go to a wind and solar economy is if government mandates it, because again, it makes zero economic sense. And economic sense means that American people are left with fewer resources in their checkbooks and their pocketbooks, less money to purchase goods and services that make our lives healthier, wealthier, longer lasting, et cetera. So I think it's very important to allow the most sensible and the most efficient energy sources to prevail in a free and open market.
James, a Democrat in Baltimore, your question or comment about climate change?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. When is enough enough? We have these fires in California, in Australia, we have the tornadoes, we have all these hurricanes, and all this is due to climate change. Now, for Mr. Taylor to say that there is no climate change, that this is something that happens naturally, that's wrong. We are the ones that's putting the carbon in the air. We're the ones that is polluting the country, and to sit there and say that wind and solar energy is not a way to go, because we cannot continue to use fossil fuels in order to gain power in this country, not only in this country, but in this world. If we want to have something left for our great-grandchildren, where they don't have to walk around with gas masks on. I mean, we walk around with masks on because of the virus. They would have to walk around with gas masks on because of the air that they would have to breathe.
Well, I really appreciate and empathize the caller, I believe it was James, the caller's concerns. And I'm glad that these are things that are on your mind. But it's important to understand and appreciate the difference between some anecdotal exceptions to the rule and what the trend is. So the caller mentioned wildfires, tornadoes, and hurricanes. Well, NASA satellites have been able to measure the amount of land burned by wildfires. They've been able to measure this for between 20 and 30 years. I forget the exact number. But what they find is that in that time period, over the past 20 to 30 years, the area that's been burned by wildfires has declined by 25%. So when you have wildfires in Australia or California, remember, wildfires have always occurred. They always will occur. Global warming is not going to magically make it stop all of a sudden. So the fact that the media will cover these events, which of course they are newsworthy events, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they're getting worse or that global warming caused them. The objective scientific evidence shows that wildfires are becoming less frequent and severe as the Earth modestly warms. Tornadoes, the same thing. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, you can go onto the website and look at their charts and their reports. Their data show that tornadoes have again become less frequent and less severe as the Earth modestly warms. It's not in dispute. Yes, tornadoes will still occur. And when they do occur, the media will cover them as they should. But to then link it to global warming simply makes no sense when they're becoming less frequent and severe. Regarding hurricanes, we have hurricane data that shows that the accumulated cyclonic energy, in other words, the total global energy from hurricanes, we've been able to measure that for the past 40, 50 years. And what we see is no increase whatsoever as the Earth modestly warms. And the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change itself reports that they have low confidence in any links between climate change and hurricanes. So I agree and I understand and I empathize with your concern on these points. If natural disasters start becoming rampant and severe, then that's something we have to be concerned about. But fortunately, the scientific evidence is very clear right now that as our Earth modestly warms, these events as a whole, at worst, are staying about the same, but really appear to be becoming less frequent and less severe. And that stands to reason when we know that during the Little Ice Age, the coldest time period of the past 10,000 years, extreme weather events were much more frequent and severe than they are today.
Virginia and Sarasota, Florida, Republican.
Yes, didn't I hear years ago that they were destroying the rainforests? Why don't we just plant more trees?
Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Taylor, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you, Virginia. For example, in South America, there is, as human population grows, there is pressure on the rainforests. More of the rainforests are being cut down and developed, and it's an issue that is subject to international politics and negotiation. What scientists have discovered every now and then when we see fires in the Amazon, which by the way, fires in the Amazon are naturally occurring as well as human caused for reasons due not to global warming. But what scientists have discovered is, again, in the Amazon, we are not seeing an increase in fires caused by natural sources. We're seeing an increase in precipitation. So I do believe that we should be good stewards of the earth. I do believe that we should take whatever measures we can to address real environmental issues. Fires in the rainforest are one of them. But again, for climate change, when climate activists try to make the connection, the scientific evidence simply isn't there. But I agree, we should all be looking to be good stewards of the environment, and I hope we will be.
Peggy in Washington State, Democratic caller. Hi, Peggy.
Hi. Yeah, I was real happy to see Biden end the Keystone pipeline because it would only be the loss of a few thousand temporary jobs, but only 50 full-time jobs, and most of those would be located in Canada. As far as the economy, even during a 2004 interview, Trump stated, it just seems that the economy does better under Democrats than Republicans. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your comments, Peggy. I'll note that, especially today, with unemployment rising so much, with so many Americans unable to find work, not because of their own lack of skills, not because of their own lack of motivation, but because of the situation we're in with COVID and shutdowns and lockdowns. Even the few thousand jobs, that's a few thousand Americans who will be able to put food on their plate, on their table, pay their mortgage, not be reliant on handouts to do so. I think it's very important. But it's more than just those direct jobs, those direct construction jobs that you referenced. It's about 3 times more expensive to transport oil via railroad or truck from Canada to the refineries in Louisiana, for example. It's still going to happen. It's just not going to happen by an efficient underground pipeline. It's going to happen above ground on the road where you're going to have trucks and trains, by the way, emitting more carbon dioxide than a pipeline would. But also when oil prices rise as a result of transportation prices being higher, that's going to kill jobs throughout the economy because people will be spending more money on the same energy And that leaves less money to spend on other goods and services throughout the economy that not only provide value to American households, but create jobs throughout the economy. But I appreciate your concerns, and I think it's great that we all have these conversations.
Stefan in Wilson, North Carolina, Independent.
Good morning, C-SPAN. Yes, I want to talk. We're saying this the wrong way. I need to ask the gentleman. I want to ask him this question. Okay, you could be right both ways. It could be causing climate change, or it could not. But the fact is, are we willing to take that gamble? Okay, he could be right. The other people could be right. But if we lose on this gamble, we have lost the earth. It's going to get to a point of no return. This is something that we can't chance. Now, I heard the Republicans say all the time, we can't leave our kids this debt. Oh, it's a shame. Well, if we live in debt, they could get out of debt. But if we live on an earth that they can't grow crops and stuff, it's going to be pitiful. And I want to tell this gentleman about that. Now, let me finish, please. Now, it's a win-win situation if we do this. It's going to create jobs, for one thing. It's going to clean up the environment. Less people are going to be getting sick. Our water is going to be cleaner. It's a win-win situation. This can be done. Also, America consumes 25% of the world's fossil fuels. I noticed you said India and China was the biggest emission. We are the biggest emissioner. And we have to take the lead. We have to take the lead in this because the world's follow America. But we cannot take a chance on this. If we take a gamble and we lose, we'll finish.
Okay.
Even you.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Mr. Taylor, your response.
Well, Devon, thank you so much for expressing your concerns. I really do appreciate them. Regarding the experiment, the notion of an experiment, we do know that temperatures were significantly warmer than today for most of the past 10,000 years. We'd have to keep warming at our present pace for at least a couple centuries before we reach the state of what would be deemed an experiment. And I think it's highly unlikely that 200 years from now, we're going to be a coal and oil-driven economy. We also know that as temperatures have modestly warmed, you mentioned, for example, crop production, and I'm glad you did, because in virtually every nation in the world, and for the world as a whole, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which keeps detailed crop records, shows that production and yields per acre have been increasing consistently as the earth modestly warms. We set new records virtually every year throughout the globe for crop production. More carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, longer growing seasons, fewer frost events. These are all conducive to and beneficial to crop production. Finally, if you do believe that we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, if you do believe that it's important to reduce conventionally defined pollutants, again, we should not be shutting down natural gas production on federal lands. The reason why the United States has reduced emissions more than any country in the world this century is because we have allowed natural gas production to thrive through the free market. And just one final note, China's emissions are indeed more than twice what the United States are. We may utilize a lot of energy, but we do so smartly, in part because we're utilizing natural gas and China isn't. But thanks for the call. I really appreciate the concerns.
Deborah in Westchester, Ohio, Republican. You're on the air with the president of the Heartland Institute, James Taylor. Go ahead.
My concern is how we've allowed the politicians to turn climate into a political issue. And I am a scientist, not a climate scientist, but I've been reading it for 15 years. I would say when you go to nasa.gov, you're going to find something called the Summit telescope. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but it's the Solar Ultraviolet Magnetographic Investigative Telescope. We also have the Solar Dynamics Observatory that was launched in 2011, and we launched a probe last year from NASA. And all of that tells us there's so much data that we're keeping on the sun because the sun's energy in our stratosphere is what has a direct impact on our weather. Not the total impact, but the direct impact. Now, from the Summit telescope that's mounted in Hawaii, NASA has one model that shows we might go through a significant cooling period between 2030 and 2045, and that could cool the Earth significantly, maybe similar to a little ice age, but it's only a model. The other thing is when we talk about climate, we have to get the politicians out of this. We have to talk about nitrous oxide, ozone, let's talk about the gases. CO2, which sequestration, carbon sequestration and storage in the future is coming. We have to talk about ozone, and the Montreal Protocols of 1980 were very effective with that. But you get what I'm saying. I mean, we're not introducing science to our American associates. We're introducing a political view of science.
Okay, Deborah. Mr. Taylor,
great.
Go ahead.
Great points, Deborah. Thank you for raising them. I encourage viewers, listeners, to look up and read the scientific work of, for example, Dr. Willie Soon, Dr. Nir Shaviv, Dr. Henrik Svensmark, et cetera, Sebastian Loenig. They talk about and they document how fluctuations in solar energy have such a significant impact on the Earth's climate. Now, carbon dioxide likely does also impact the Earth's climate, but it's not the primary or dominant driver that is often told to us by politicians or people who believe in a climate crisis. And I think it is important that we look at the science and that we look at it independently and for ourselves. At the Heartland Institute, we have a website, climaterealism.com, where each day we go and look at what the media is claiming about climate science, that what we call the climate scare of the day, and we present the true science. You can also go to climateataglance.com, and you can see summaries, for example, of hurricanes or tornadoes or droughts or whatever, of various global warming topics and see what the science says.
Michael, Foxborough, Massachusetts, independent.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Just a quick history for me. I'm 59 years old, live up in Massachusetts. Growing up, we had a river down the street. We called it the Dye River. It changed every Thursday a different color, purple, brown, and orange. Back in the day, we used to talk about pollution, and growing up, it was kind of taught in schools about how important it was to love our environment. And I think my message here is, I think we get lost in this whole climate change connotation, where really what we're talking about is making our environment cleaner and healthier to live in. And I think, instead of constantly focusing on, what the science says, I think you can just look out your door and know whether or not, we're treating the environment properly. And I guess my question is, I'd like to get his opinion, the speaker's opinion on the recent change or the recent decision by GM to go zero emission by 2035, and how that fits in with, some of his thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. Addressing your second question first. I find it probably not so much a coincidence that GM announces this now that we have a Biden administration. The automakers were very happy when the Trump administration postponed the Obama squeezing of corporate average or fuel economy standards, fuel economy mandates. So GM sees an opportunity. This is the folks who are regulating them who would like this to be the case. They're currying favor. Now, I'm not a part of the discussions that go on in the back room, but you can see the timing of this. I suspect that ultimately, much like before in years past, when there's great enthusiasm for the hydrogen highway and other so-called game changers in terms of automobile production technology, fuel, et cetera, I suspect it's not going to work out. Regarding your comments about the environment in general, yeah, it's a good thing that we've made such progress that we have. So, for example, according to the EPA, compared to 1980, our air is 70% cleaner now than it was in 1980. We have 70% fewer emissions, which is ironic considering that polls taken year after year asking the American people if they believe our air is getting cleaner or dirtier, approximately 70% will always say that it's getting dirtier. In fact, it's getting much cleaner. That's a good thing, and we should be vigilant to make sure that's the case. And that's one of the reasons why I'm very concerned about wind turbines, for example, and solar panels, but especially wind turbines, because environmental concerns are more than just carbon dioxide emissions. So, for example, scientists at Harvard University who are looking for ways to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, they want to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. They published a study, and they looked at how many wind turbines we would need to replace conventional energy, as Joe Biden proposes to do in the next couple decades. What they found is that we would have to cover literally 1/3 of the American landmass with wind turbines to replace current electricity. And if we require the electrification of automobiles and transportation, now that would be 1/2 of our landmass. Think about the absolutely devastating environmental impacts of leveling half of our forests, half of our wildlife habitat, half of our open plains, populating half of our coastal seashores. That to me would be far more destructive than anything I can think of, including even the worst case scenarios, which are unlikely to occur, but even the worst case scenarios for climate change. We simply cannot destroy half of America's environment and open spaces in the name of wind power. That's not clean energy and it's not environmentally friendly.
Let's go to Clarence next. He's our last, a Republican in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Morning.
I just want to make 2 great points. I think we lost common sense in America. We realize we have 4 seasons. That the climate change is winter, fall, summer, and spring. If the climate is going to change. And the thing is, God, I just wanted to say, it was a caller calling earlier saying something about we have to worry about the earth and all that. God is saying, I'm a preacher. So let me tell you what God said. God said the earth is the Lord and the fullness of the world and them that dwell therein. We don't control this world. God controls it. Man, we can help the pollution, but we can't control the world and when it's going to be destroyed or how long it's going to be here because we don't have that power.
Okay, Clarence. Mr. Taylor, final thoughts.
Well, from God and from human ethics, we are charged with being good stewards of the environment. And that's one of the reasons I think we need to look beyond just carbon dioxide emissions. And we should look at carbon dioxide emissions. But we also have to keep in mind many of the other devastating, unique environmental harms from wind and solar power. If wind and solar power can cure those environmental harms, and if they can compete and give us a competitively priced energy product, I'll be the first one cheering them on. It's not that I want to promote or detract from any particular energy source other than what their impact is on Americans' living standards and on our environment. So thank you, caller. Those are good points.
You can go to heartland.org to learn more about the Heartland Institute. James Taylor, the president, we appreciate your time this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you.